Night cloaks the airfield in a cold, metallic stillness, the kind that makes every breath feel like it hangs a second too long before dissolving into the darkness. Somewhere in the black beyond the hangars, engines grumble to life, their sounds swelling in the void like distant thunder. The narrator's voice cuts in low and measured, threading tension through every word. These are the stories of men who served on the other side of history's dividing line. 8 moments, 8 lives. 8 choices that would leave their mark on a world at war. The first comes to life in the frigid skies above the Eastern Front in 1943, where Oberleutnant Erich Hartmann, barely 21 years old, guides his Messerschmitt Bfön 09G into the pale winter light. His breath frosts the inside of his mask as his gloved hands rest almost delicately on the stick. Through his canopy, the fractured sunlight catches the vapor trails of Soviet Yak-9 south ahead, and his wingman crackles over the radio. Lead, 2 contacts at 11 o'clock. Hartmann's reply is steady, almost calm, though his stomach tightens with that instinctive anticipation before the dive. I see them, he says. Then the nose of his fighter tips forward, and the world becomes a blur of ice and steel. The second story unfolds hundreds of miles south in the North African desert, where an ocean of sand glitters under a pitiless sun. It is 1941, and Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, scans the horizon from atop his command car, goggles pushed up into his hairline. The heat ripples distort the silhouettes of his advancing panzers, and there is an almost dreamlike quality to their movement until the thunder of their engines reaches his ears. He jots quick notes on a map balanced against his knee, muttering to his aide-de-camp, "We will not fight them on their terms. We will move faster, think sharper." Dust curls around his boots as he steps down, walking between mechanics with oil-blackened hands, tank crews laughing a little too loud to hide their nerves. The British are somewhere ahead, dug in. But Rommel's eyes gleam, not with arrogance, but with the gambler's quiet thrill. From the heat, the scene drops to a cold, gray swell in the North Atlantic, 1942. Captain Lieutenant Günther Prien stands in the conning tower of U-47, the salt spray freezing on his collar. The sky is a low ceiling of cloud, the sea heaves like the chest of a sleeping giant. The crew waits, tense in the red-lit control room below. A hydrophone operator raises a hand convoy detected. Prien calls down orders in clipped, decisive German, and the boat tilts gently into its new course. In the confined space, the smell of diesel mingles with the acrid tang of anxiety. Moments later, the periscope rises. Through its slender lens, merchant vessels stagger across the horizon like weary beasts of burden. "Ziel Erfast?" Prien murmurs, target acquired, before lowering the scope and giving the order to fire. The muffled roar of torpedoes leaving their tubes shudders through the hull, followed by a tense silence that seems to last forever. The fourth moment leaps to the icebound wastes of Finland's Lapland in late 1939, during the Winter War. A young Finnish volunteer named Arne Judilainen, nicknamed the Terror of Morocco for his years in the French Foreign Legion, now fights alongside the Germans years later as part of the Waffen-SS. Snowflakes cling to the fur lining of his cap as he leads a patrol through the pines. "Listen," he whispers, raising a hand, and the soldiers fan out silently, boots crunching in deep drifts. Somewhere far off, the dull thump of artillery echoes. Arne's breath comes hard, controlled, the old Legion discipline in every movement. He is not fighting for ideology. He is fighting because war is the only language life has ever let him master. We sink then to the claustrophobic, oil-slick decks of the battleship Yamato in 1945, her massive turrets looming like gods of war against the dawn. Below deck, Petty Officer Second Class Hiroshi Takeda ties the chin strap of his helmet, feeling the distant rumble of engines through the solace of his feet. The voice over the loudspeaker orders all hands to battle stations. "They say this is a one-way mission," whispers a friend beside him, trying for a smile that doesn't quite hold. Hiroshi nods once as if sealing a private vow. He knows the sea they are steaming toward will be choked with American carrier planes. He knows the armor plating around him is both fortress and tomb. And still, he shoulders his rifle, stepping into the sunlight as the deck tilts slightly beneath the turn of the ship's great rudder. From the Pacific, we moved to the Italian Apennines in late 1944, where a small unit of paratroopers from the German Fallschirmjäger holds a crumbling monastery. The walls are cold stone, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and cordite. Feldwebel Karl Muller leans against a window frame, scanning the valley through binoculars. "They're comin'," he mutters to the young soldier beside him, who shifts nervously with his MP40. Outside, the distant rumble of artillery begins, like the slow roll of an approaching storm. Karl thinks briefly of his wife's last letter, folded in the breast pocket of his tunic, her handwriting looping and soft against the harshness of this place. He cannot know if he will see her again, but he can choose to hold the line a little longer. The seventh tail drifts high above in the pale blue of the upper atmosphere, where the Heinkel He-162 Salamander makes one of its desperate late-war test flights. 17-year-old Lieutenant Alfred Am sits alone in the cockpit, hands sweating inside his gloves despite the freezing air outside. The jet's whine is higher, sharper than any propeller aircraft he's known, and it vibrates through his bones. Below, the green fields of Germany blur past at impossible speed. The war is nearly lost, and yet here he is part of a frantic bid to claw back time with technology. Over the intercom, a ground controller asks for his status. "Still flying?" Alfred says softly, but it sounds more like a question to himself than a report. The final moment lies in the shattered streets of Berlin, April 1945. Smoke drifts between skeletal buildings. Unteroffizier Dieter Weiss moves cautiously through the ruins with what remains of his squad. The crack of rifle fire echoes down an alley and they drop instantly, pressing themselves against the crumbling wall of what used to be a bakery. "They're everywhere," one whispers. Weiss scans the street-eye's gritty, uniform-torn and for a moment he allows himself to remember his mother's kitchen. The smell of warm bread, the laughter of a time so far removed it might as well be another life. "We keep moving," he says, because stopping is not an option. Above them, the red banner is already beginning to ripple from the Reichstag. The narrator's voice returns as the scenes dissolve one into another, each face fading into the next, the clamor of battle slowly replaced by a low, rising string section. They were sons and fathers, pilots and sailors, soldiers and dreamers, bound not by the justice of their cause, but by the currents of a world in flames. History has judged the war they fought. But in their moments brief, human, and irrevocable, they were simply men caught in the tide. The music swells and the last image freezes, a young face half lit by firelight, eyes fixed on something unseen as the darkness closes in.